Hello, and welcome to Bridging the Evidence Gap. I'm Alice Obrecht, and I'm a research fellow at ALNAP. 15 liters of water per person per day, 3.5 meters squared per crisis-affected person. These indicators are well known to humanitarian field workers and are used worldwide every day to define the minimum standard of quality for humanitarian action. But where did they come from, and were they based on formal evidence? And, importantly, should that matter? These are the questions we aim to explore today on our 5th episode of the Bridging the Evidence Gap series, entitled Getting Up to Standard, the Role of Evidence in the Sphere Standards Revision Process. Today we are delighted to be focusing on the Sphere Handbook, which is one of the most widely respected institutions in the humanitarian system. The first edition of the Sphere Handbook launched in 2000, and the Sphere standards are one of the oldest and most widely known and internationally recognized set of standards for humanitarian response today. They've undergone 3 revisions and are considered by many in the sector to be synonymous with quality. The Sphere standards, as many are aware, are now being revised for a 4th time, with the new handbook expected in 2018. So the last edition of the Sphere standards was produced in 2011, and a lot has changed in the humanitarian system since that last edition. In particular, there's been a huge increase in research and evidence production in humanitarian action. So what we're going to be talking about today is, what does this mean? What does this new research and evidence production mean for the new Sphere standards? Does this increased focus and increased activity in research and evidence offer a benefit to the Sphere standards? Is it a burden? And how are the chapter leads grappling with it? So I'd like to note a few points at the outset. The first key point for this webinar today is that we really want to focus specifically on these issues of evidence and the use of evidence to inform the Sphere revision. So what that means is that we will not be providing detailed background to the Sphere standards themselves or to the broader process, the very intensive consultation process that's been going on for the Sphere revision. If you're interested in finding more background or general information on the Sphere revision process, you can click on the links that are being provided to you in the chat box at the moment, or just look at the Sphere website, where you'll find all the details you could ever want, including the current draft of the new handbook. A second housekeeping point is that, as usual, if you've participated in one of our previous webinars, you'll know that we really like to hear from you throughout the webinar using the chat box on the right-hand side of your screen. And please submit questions to our panelists on the right-hand side, which we will be getting to in the last half hour to 45 minutes of the webinar today. So I'm going to walk through a kind of general overview of what we're going to do today and the plan for the webinar. And while I do so, I want to put up our survey question to find out from you in the room how important you think this issue is for Sphere. So how important do you think it is for the Sphere standards, the indicators and the thresholds, to be based on high quality evidence? So you can give us your thoughts now. And while you do so, I just want to give a brief overview to the plan for this afternoon. So first, we're going to be hearing from Anini and Nadig on the overview of the Sphere revision process, where it's at to date, and really what are the broader issues that Sphere is looking at in terms of evidence and context, and how they're trying to address the new evidence base in the Sphere revision, and how they're also trying to address issues around contextualization in the revision. So Anini is going to give us the broad picture of Sphere across all of the chapters and for the entire revision. We're then going to delve a bit deeper into 2 specific chapters. So for that, we are delighted to be joined by Kit Dyer, who's going to be talking to us about the WASH chapter, and Jude Harvey, who will be talking to us about the health chapter. And then finally, we're going to hear from a quasi-academic. I only say quasi-academic because Séverine Frison is both an academic and a practitioner, and she's currently working on more of the practitioner side of things at MSF, at the epicenter for MSF. But Séverine has a PhD, and she's recently co-authored a gap mapping piece mapping the evidence against the 2011 Sphere Standards, so the most recent edition of the Sphere Standards. And she'll be talking about some of the lessons learned and the findings coming out of that important piece of work. So it looks like we have a really good lineup, a number of different perspectives who can be talking about the interactions between producers of evidence and users of evidence for the Sphere Standards revision. And to kind of guide us in that, we're going to close the survey and see what the results are, what people think, and maybe we can see if minds are changed by the end of the day. Great, so very important, good. 5% not a priority, very interesting. I hope the people who wrote not a priority and I don't know can add questions and comments in the chat box so we can bring those perspectives in during the discussion.